Okay, now that Pat's here, we'll start the meeting at 2 minutes or 2 o'clock and 37 seconds. I'd like to welcome everybody. For the audience here today, the city of Glendora utilizes a hybrid meeting format to allow for participation both in person and virtually. In consideration of others and the business conducted today, please silence your phones and electronic devices and refrain from speaking unless recognized. So Pat, you've muted your phone. Okay. Again, this is a public meeting for the community of Glendora. We appreciate and respect your participation here this afternoon. So Madam Clerk, would you please call roll?
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. At this time, I will conduct an oral roll call and request that each commissioner respond with present when their name is called. Commissioner Holmes,
Present.
Commissioner Cece,
Present.
Commissioner Thomas,
Present.
Vice Chair Nakano. Let the record show he's absent. Chair Hansen.
Present.
We have four commissioners here and one absent.
Point of order, Mr. Chair, is Mr. McConnell termed out? Is he an official member?
Technically, he's here till July 1.
Okay,
So
where is he?
he will not be able to conduct any formal business with us. So he's checked out.
Noted for the record that he's missed.
Okay, this is a special budget workshop, and we're going to be going over budget for 23-24. And I would invite, or to actually 23-24 and 24-25, a 2-year budget and capital improvement program. And I'd like Ms. DeCastro to give us a report.
What? Can you just hear me? Okay. Well, first of all, we would like to thank you for your time, for being with us today for this very special and exciting meeting. It's all about the numbers. So we start off with the outline. So the agenda that we have for today is about the CIP, the water operation budget, revenues, the next steps, and the recommendations after that. And then, so here, for the 5-year estimated capital improvement program, or the CIP budget, we lay out some numbers here, but we wanted to emphasize that due to the ongoing infrastructure assessment, this might change, or there's a lot of things going on, but we will let you know if there's some changes. But based on the priorities and the assessment that we have in conjunction with AKM Consulting Engineering and also with our water staff. And so here's the exciting part. So the budget summary, we'll talk about the expenses. So as you can see, the FY 22 and 23, these are the year-to-date actual. So that's based on May 25th, 2023, when we pull these numbers. So the total expenses we have is about 16 million. And then the projected 23-24 budget is about 17 million, and 24-25 forecasted expenses budget is about 18.5 million.
Do you want to do the whole presentation first and then take questions? Let's do it that way.
I can do that.
Okay. So go ahead. So that's for the expenses, and then we'll move on to the revenue side. So these are the projected revenue schedule, just based on the result of the ongoing water rate study and infrastructure as well. So this might be changes because the year-to-date that we have for 2022-23 is just as mentioned, May 25th, 2023. So we have about a month to go before the end of fiscal year in order for us to get the actual. So these are just estimate for 15 million, and then proposed budget will be 23 million. And also for 24-25, it's about 23 million. And that again depends on the water rate case assessment study that we're working on. But so far, we're still finalizing those parts, so we will let you know ahead once we get the final assessment for those. So these are the tentative timeline we have for now. So June 15 is about city council study session. And the June 27 will be going to the city meeting and a workshop. And then after that, there will be the adoption. And of course, the recommendations to receive and file the update on the proposed 2-year budget for fiscal years 22-23 and 24-25. So we just reached the end of the presentation, and then the best part is the questions you have.
Okay, thank you for that, that presentation. I don't see any members of the public, here, so can I, forego reading, we're not being. No one's watching, so we can,
That's
My
right.
wife is.
And there's no public comment for Zoom as well.
Okay, all right. Pat, you got a question? Or David?
I'm new to this, so I wonder if you could just go through these categories and explain what they are to me,
Okay, let me
both
go.
on the operations and the expense and the revenue side. Debt service, I think I understand is payment on our
Go
debt.
right
But production, what exactly does that entail?
today. Okay, there. Yeah. Okay, to identify those questions you have, so the debt services is more on financing part, on the production part. So that's
Can
the
I,
question.
can I
I'm
just
sorry.
back up, Mr. Chair? I would like debt service, that's obviously for bond payments.
Yes,
How
correct.
many different bonds are out there?
Not sure, because that depends on the finance,
I mean, is it, we're bonded out for something that we're paying,
for the CIP
yeah,
projects.
okay.
Correct.
And just to add to that, and Mala, I can take Dave's question on as far as breaking down the categories.
Mhm.
Again, this is really very tentative now until our ongoing infrastructure assessment is done. And as part of that assessment, we will be proposing to take out an additional bond, which will modify the debt service number. And so that will be presented to this commission once those numbers have been proposed.
You gonna get a new bond or refinance the other one or?
Well, this is strictly for water.
Yeah.
And so this bond actually, quite frankly, covers more than water, but the bond that we're proposing as part of the infrastructure assessment will cover just water.
Water.
And that will be a new bond, yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, and to answer Dave's question, so.
Well, let me just also say that let's, since this is a pretty short presentation, even if we don't have a question, why don't you give us your definition of each one of the, production, transmission, water customer service, water administration? Just give us a little paragraph of description. So when you answer the questions, then you can go on to the next line. So.
Okay, so production, that covers all the salaries under production, which also covers the supplies, the division supplies that they needed for that, the building materials, equipment parts, the chlorination supplies, the pump and well supplies, the SCADA system, the juice and membership, and the pumps, wells, reservoir, and the contract services. So that's included under the production. So anything that our system produce, that goes into that category to produce more water, the groundwater. And then in terms of,
Answer your question, David?
Yeah, I didn't understand all of that, but so anything that we use to produce the water, including chlorine and all the other equipment and so on, is included in here.
Everything it takes to run your house
Yeah,
goes into that category.
all right.
to get water.
Then, one thing I noticed, how you want to keep going through the categories?
Yeah, what I want to do is just go down the
the-
category. So we go after, if that's the answer to the question, then go down to transmission distribution.
Good. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so transmission distribution, so that's the other part of the division where it includes also the official, the office division supplies, and the electric parts, and then the equipment parts, the street repair and maintenance, and the water line parts and supplies, the dues and membership for the staff, and the water line repairs, the electric, and the
Okay.
contract services under that category.
Thank you.
And this is all about operations. It's not about capital.
No.
Yeah.
It's, so everything what we're talking about right now, it's more on operations. And then if we move on for the water customer service, so these include the salary, the supplies, the office division, equipment, meter parts and supplies, the printing, postage, training and education, the phone, and of course, the contract services.
How many customer service people do we have?
I believe we
Or
have
on that entire staff, I guess.
four.
Thank you.
Four staff. And then for the water administration, so that includes the salary as well, the supplies, the equipment, and then the building materials, the operating leases, which we shared with along with the other divisions. And then the training and education, the contract services, the vehicle charges, and the liability insurance charges. And for the water conservation, the salary, the benefits, the workers' comp and all that, the printing, supplies, dues and membership, training, and also we have some water conservation rebates that's going on, so that's included in that line. And so lastly, it's on the support. So those are the other, so other than the water admin, we have also shared some expenses throughout the other division or other departments that goes to other here. So they are the one who's supporting our department. So that includes the salary, the benefits, the leases, advertising, legal services, the allowance, vehicle allowance, the flex pay, and the contract services and contingency into that line item.
Mr. Chair, that, would that cost allocation include city manager, police, everything, you can allocate money out
Yes,
to?
that goes to under support
Thank you.
category.
Yeah.
Just so we're spending about $1 million a year on conservation. What's the 2 or 3 largest categories that fall within that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say for one, the biggest category under conservation would be certainly our turf removal program. And essentially, that's something that we just completed based on the fact that we ran out of funds for this fiscal year that will be renewed for next fiscal year. So, and really a part of that is just getting ready for the state's mandate. You have artificial turf, which we have to prepare, but it's really primarily just turf removal. That's number one, but also number two, we have our rebate programs. So these are items like dishwashers, shower heads, things like that, being able to provide money for folks to be able to take advantage of those rebate programs. So I would say those two are the biggest items when it comes to water conservation.
If you had to put a percentage or a number on those two, what percentage of $1 million does that outlay represent, do you think?
Oh, that's certainly more than 50%.
Was it really?
Specifically for the turf removal program. When you think about the not only the residential, but also the schools. One of the things that we're looking at doing is partnering with Glendora Unified School Districts to be able to remove all of their turf that they're not currently using. But also here, I think the city, city facilities, we also have a number of turf that we don't use that we would like to remove as well. And so a significant portion of those funds goes for those programs.
Okay.
Uh, in
I didn't realize we spent that much, but I just heard on the news today that California, I guess, was one of the worst conserving states apparently in the country. We only saved collectively like 7% over the last 2 or 3 years. City of Glendora, I think, did well, right? We did do well.
Right.
But California collectively was just 7%. So
You gotta watch those numbers. If you go back to 1990.
Yeah.
You get the bigger savings and now you're just getting incremental savings. If you go back to 1990, look at the conservation, we're probably doing very, very, very well.
yeah, and I'm sure that, and they, we got a lot of agriculture here who, they either let their, crops go or they're using the water. So it's hard to conserve that, right? So there's a lot of caveats, I think, in that number, but I'm just saying, when I saw that number and then I thought about Glendora, I thought, wow, we're doing well. I didn't know we were spending that much on conservation here, but I mean, that's fine if that's what it's achieving.
Yeah,
Okay. so thank
absolutely.
you.
Yeah, in addition to that, we also have a contract services expenses where we are in partnership with Waterwise and SoCal Gas to promote more efficiency on water and their equipment that they're using right now.
I'm not sure how to coin this question, but under the support, on a percentage basis, how much do you spend on other departments? I mean, it's been recognized in cities for forever that the water departments is the cash cow. You're the one that makes money for the city.
We're the second.
And so
one.
and so the rest of the city pirates your revenue to fund their operations. Is it a realistic number that the city takes from you, or
It's
is
the
it high?
way that finance and the city manager allocate how much percentage it goes to each department. So that's been like set for long years.
So in simple terms, Mr. Chair, so we have, for this fiscal year, we have a total revenue of a budget of about 16.3 million. Support funds is about 3 million out of that 16 million. That's how much is used to subsidize other departments, other city functions and things of that nature. Out of our operations budget of 16 million, you could say 3 million of that is used for that.
I guess why, I mean, my only concern would be is that if you were not able to do the asset repair and replacement because money was taken out of your funds, I would be concerned about that. So I just want to make sure that it's fair and equitable across the board.
Absolutely. And again, when we talk about the infrastructure assessment and how we fund that, we can certainly talk about how that money is divvied up between the departments. But we certainly want to make sure, first and foremost, that we have enough funds to be able to adequately meet our infrastructural needs, both from a water supply and operations perspective.
I like the term cash cow. I think it's called an enterprise fund. But no, I don't. You know, and you know, and you're right, because you do get revenues from the water, and no other department in the city has that opportunity to share parks and library. In fact, they're taking, and that's very common to have water or electric if you're in Azusa or Burbank that has that, or a sewer fee. There's, you know, so, yeah.
I certainly support that. I just don't want it to be overly supportive.
So I have a question. So, and please correct me if I'm wrong, the city taxpayer funded operations, I imagine shouldn't be regarded as a profit center of sorts. However, of course, you know, aside from sales tax and fees and other things, I get that whatever incoming revenue we have needs to support the infrastructure, right? All across the board. However, I'm trying to figure out a way to say this too.
Nicely.
Because I guess I just didn't really realize that the revenue of water was being funded, but that's fine. It is what it is, right? We got to support our city. But I did notice that in the budget versus the expected revenue for the next couple of years, you know, we're on the negative for this year, but in the next 2 years, there's an excess of, I think, $5 or $6 million, whatever it was. So then when we talk about water rates, if we're going to have an excess of, you know, 20% or whatever that number comes out to, theoretically, should water rates go down then, right? Because I understand that we can't go back, we can't be balanced, right? Because we need, you know, funds for our capital outlays and so forth and other infrastructure plans over the next several years. I used to be the president of my HOA, right? So you do a reserve audit, and you have your out, you know, you have reserves and you spend it, you reserve and you spend it, right? And I imagine the city's that on a much larger scale. I guess my question is, being that we're also supporting other departments, is there some sort of percentage that we're looking at that when we say, okay, for the next couple of years, if we think our expenses are going to be this, we want to try to get our revenue to be this, to have this much of a gap, right? Is there a number of what that gap is?
Absolutely.
Percentage?
Well, yes, you know, well, according to Prop 218, number one, we have to make sure that whatever revenues we bring in, that we're now bringing in significantly much more than how much we're using to fund our operations and our water supply. What that exact number is, Commissioner, I don't know, but I can certainly get that for you.
Or is
But
there a
one-
percentage of that gap? Not a number, but a percentage?
Well, there is a percentage,
Okay.
and that's something I can
Okay.
certainly look into. But one thing I also do want to say is you'll see when we present on our water infrastructure assessment and our proposed rate study is that, as a matter of fact, by us, we are actually reducing our water costs, our bills for a significant portion of our community, because of a number of factors. But also we are making it more fair and equitable by having more tiers, right? Right now, we only have 2-tier system, but by having more tiers, it allows folks to incentivizes folks to be able to save water, right? If they use less water. So that is something that we will discuss in detail at that workshop.
I mean, and again, I guess I just never thought about it that it's a revenue generating department and therefore you need revenue, right? Aside from everything else, all the other budgets. So I guess that would be my question. That it's a rhetorical question, but you know, how much are other departments siphoning off of water funds, right? Because theoretically, I don't mind paying what I'm paying now, and
And
I mean,
we live in a beautiful city.
yeah, we live in a
so-
beautiful city, and if we had extra money to go towards more police and the homeless problem, all the other things, fine. It's just, there's got to be a point where it's like, you know, we also can't be charging too much and have this massive gap that other departments start siphoning off of.
Absolutely.
Just-
And that's precisely what Prop 218 is for, is to be able to manage that. So
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay, moving on.
so we also have a water reserve policy that takes place that we have, the city is allowed to keep like a certain time in case of emergency or catastrophic. So that's part of that policy as well. Sorry.
Okay, so that takes us through the expenses.
Okay, and then
Oh, David's got another question.
Troublemaker.
Oh. you want-
The, so my understanding from what you just told me is, that water administration admin costs are for, let's say, upper management charges that are needed to administer the water system. But the support is an overhead to support the overall government activities in Glendora. Is that a oversimplification?
It's an allocation. What they would say is the city manager, I won't pick on him, but I will. He spends so much of his time on water, his staff, so they'll allocate portion of their benefits and salary to the water. Same with the police department, library, parks.
Okay,
Everybody gets their piece because it's an enterprise fund. So they're trying to
all right.
I mean, and the city council ultimately has to determine if that balance is right or proper.
Okay.
Or the ratepayers, we're gonna come in up in arms with them. So
Okay. All right. That answers the question.
yeah, city lawyer, I mean, city attorney, everything is just because water is a revenue generator. They don't have too many opportunities in the city to try to balance funds out in other departments. So
Okay, it's just the total in those two categories. is a
It's-
big fraction of the total cost, of the total expense.
it's significant and hopefully there's accountability, you know, where that allocation that they make to other departments is legitimized in some way.
Okay, revenue summary.
Okay, in terms of revenue, let's start with the water services charges. So those are the charges we impose to customer where it covers the inspection fee, the backflow plant fee, the UBC or uniform base charges, the RTS or the ready to serve fee, and those are the fixed charges. And then the fire hydrant mirror and some other reconnection fees included in that fee. And then on the energy charge itself.
Since we've had the whole presentation, now's the time for questions, I guess. So,
Mm.
so I think what I heard Chisholm say is that the difference between fiscal year 22-23 and 23-24 is the rate assessment report that potentially is going to raise the rates.
It's a pretty significant increase.
That's why there's over six or close to $6.5 million increase there.
Yes,
Okay,
the changes.
so we're really not reducing rates.
Right, well, again, this is very tentative, so this, as part of the rate study that will come before you in September and October, again, one of the things that we're proposing to do is to take out a bond, and increase the debt service. But the rates will decrease in theory because we're having more tiers, right? And so we're able to make that a little bit more equitable as opposed to you just paying one or two. However, again, this is something that we forecasted based on history. And once we complete that assessment, we'll be sure to come back to this commission with the actual proposed numbers.
Now you've hinted at a bond issue numerous times over the last 6 months or so. Do you have a feel for what that bond issue might be? 50 million, 60 million, 100 million,
Well, no, not that much. What we're currently looking at is about a 15 million bond issue.
15 or 50?
15,
15.
15, yes. Very manageable. And so, and what that allows us to do is be able to pay that debt service and pay out that bond within a 5-year period.
That's the payout on the bond is 5 years.
5 years, yes.
And this, I mean, this, I understand what bonds are, but this is a bond that the city itself is issuing
Right. And so what it is
up to 15 million.
yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So basically, we have, based off of the assessment, we developed a number of projects that we wanted to try to accomplish, right? And it came out to about $350 million. That's our wish list.
Yeah.
But obviously, due to staffing, we it's just not feasible. Number one is staffing, but also number two, just the substantial cost impact to our residents. So we were very sensitive to that. So what we wanted to accomplish and what we felt that we could accomplish based on certain metrics is the $30 million over 5 years. So that's about $6 million a year. However, again, we don't want to impose too much cost on our residents by saying we have to pay all cash, but also, and that's why we're proposing to utilize the bonds. It allows us to invest in our infrastructure over time and not just saying, okay, well, this year we're going to raise rates by 20% to be able to cover the entire $30 million.
Sure. So when that budget for debt service, is that repayment of the bonds or is that the interest or both or everything?
Both. And that will, again, once we issue out the $15 million bond, that will increase by a certain percentage.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
And you're not including any grant funds in that?
No, so in theory, the Irwindale project is not included in the rates because that is something that we anticipate that we will complete under a separate funding mechanism such as grants.
Well, and then that allows you to, if you do get grants, just to do more projects.
Do more projects,
Yeah.
exactly. And we didn't necessarily want to build that into our customers' rates.
Great.
Last question. What's the interest on those bonds?
I believe
Yeah.
6%.
How much?
I believe 6%.
Well, that is, and again, that's one thing, and I can certainly get back to you on that, Pat, but I do believe we have variable interest, so that will depend on a number of factors, but I can certainly get back to you with.
I mean,
That
I was just asking roughly. It's
Right.
it's okay. Thank you.
Your consultant is looking at all the different bonding mechanisms, like low interest loans and stuff like that.
Yes.
Okay, so in terms of energy charge, so those are the energy that was spent to pump the water. And then the purchase water are the cost that how much we charge customer for the water.
Yeah, sure.
Energy charge looks like it's going up quite a bit. Is that the energy charge? Is the energy charge related to Edison or is that facility costs that are pumping the water, the pumps and things like that?
Yeah, so that's both. So we have the Edison and also the Azusa Light and Water. So
But it doesn't, that's all that is just electricity.
yes, correct, to pump the water, yeah.
And the reason is, and the reason it's going up is we are proposing to actually increase our energy rates as part of the rate study. And that was based off of the metrics in the study that our consultant did with nearby similarly sized municipalities. And that's simply the cost to be able to pump water from one pressure zone into another.
Yeah, understood. And that's legitimate Prop 218 charge and I
Exactly.
support that. I like that.
Yeah.
So.
And Edison is increasing rates too.
Yes.
Edison is increasing rates and also the two energy components that we deal with here at the city is Edison for our facilities that are in town, but we also have our main pumping plant out in Azusa. And so we also we also receive charges from Azusa Light and Power as well, both of which are increasing their rates.
When you say increasing the rates, you're talking about a portion on the Edison bill that goes to the city? Or
That is correct.
I think he's talking about just, you gotta pump water, it's electric, they're a customer of Edison just like we are.
Well, what I mean is he was talking about, the city was talking about increasing their rates to who? To the consumers, I assume,
Well,
right?
essentially,
So
yeah,
that's the portion of the Edison bill.
right,
that
right.
goes to
So,
the city.
so just like we're doing a rate study, Edison, they're gonna be doing a rate study and they're going to be, the cost is going up, right? Inevitably. So they're going to be increasing their rates that they charge to their customers.
Gotcha.
We are a customer to Edison. They're a regional provider of energy. So that's a sort of a pass-through cost that we
Right.
have to pass to our residents.
So just a random question. I'm sorry for another question here, but just since we're talking about electricity, so last week I was up in the Central Valley visiting customers. And as far as the eye could see, there were solar panels, solar farms everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It was incredible. Not only private enterprise to sell electricity, but also ag companies who were putting in their own solar farms, right? I don't know if there's anything we should ever do or what that cost would be, but if our energy costs are, approaching $2 million over the next couple of years, has it ever been talked about of possibly using any available city land to do something like that? Again, I don't know what the cost would be or what the return would be, but I mean,
Right.
it's, it's 10% of our annual budget here
Yeah,
is.
yeah.
Has there been any thought about that?
Absolutely. And so the thought would be, again, this is, my thought would be if we were to try to do something sustainable as far as alternative sources of energy, that would be more so of a regional project as opposed to just Glendora undertaking that on our own entity. That would be, partnership with either Southern California Edison, where they would have to lead that effort, or some sort of regional entity. But absolutely, I think sustainability is a huge topic in many, many water agencies nowadays.
Yeah, okay, just thought, thank you.
And then sales to other water companies. So those are the charges we provide to other water agency that buy water from us. And then the use of money and property, those are the interest earnings that we got. And then the last one is the miscellaneous admin. Those are the fees that includes like damage to the city and all that. So that goes into that line item.
So back to the purchased water, we're anticipating, does this mean we're buying twice as much water coming year and then almost twice as much the year after that? Or is this related to, because the rates go up year one, but don't change as much going to the second year?
Right. And so again, just for record, we don't anticipate that we're going to purchase water this year just because of the rains that we've
Right.
gotten. But however, we must remember that we are still in a drought, a prolonged drought. Metropolitan, from which we purchase our water from, ultimately through Three Valleys Municipal Water District, they're increasing their rates as well. And so that's just really making sure that we have enough cash on hand for those years in which we do need to purchase water. And again, that's all being evaluated as part of the assessment as well.
How is that accounted for? They're talking about an El Nino coming, which could be another wet year, so there'd be no purchases. And yet you've put in, $2 million. Is it goes into a fund or?
Well, it does, it remains in our operations funds. And basically what we do is we adjust this really every 6 months, so it's not, this is a biannual. Every 2 years, we officially present this to city council and adopt it. But every 6 months, we have what is called a mid-year adjustment. And that allows us time to assess, okay, well, is it a wet year? Is it a dry year? Do we need to move some of these funds? Do we need to add some funds? Quite frankly, there's no way to predict that. We're not in the business of predicting the weather, but we certainly have those mid-year adjustments that allows us to be able to assess what the hydrological conditions are.
Mhm.
And at that point, we'll assess whether to keep it, retain it, to be quite frankly, add more or potentially reduce it.
Yeah, I don't think that's a out of line number, having gone on the tour, and thank you for the tour, but some of your facilities are very old and they're getting tired and they need to be rehabbed and replaced. And so they could fail, and then you would have to purchase treated import water.
And just one of the, I get, you can't predict the future, right? So you have to account for that. I mean, if we did have a couple wet years and those funds, that excess revenue did go into a fund, what's the allocation of that fund? Is it just citywide or is it specifically for water projects? I mean, theoretically speaking, you don't have to
Right.
give specifics, but
Right.
theoretically, is that,
Yeah.
how's that handled?
Yeah, certainly. It can potentially go into capital projects. You know, we have a lot of our funds that we do transfer over to our capital projects, water capital projects for future. Or it can certainly go into our water operations as well. Typically speaking, you know, when we don't purchase water, we increase our replenishment, right? Because we're producing water from the groundwater. And that means we're going to over pump our, you know, our credit, our amount that we have. So we typically, that goes into our replenishment account, you know, to be able to account for the replenishment water that we pumped over. But most likely it goes into a capital account, and that's typically water capital projects.
Which I would support and recommend.
So that's a total revenue of 15 million year to date revenue. Yes.
So is the bottom line here gonna be that we're gonna be proposing that everyone's water rates are gonna go up by 50% next year?
No, that's certainly not the bottom line.
Because
No.
If you could look at 15 to 23 and it's paid off the water bills.
Right, right. And again, you know, we can get into the specifics of how that is the water rate, the water bills are structured. But it does allow us to be able to bring in more revenue without necessarily increasing rates for majority of the city. And again, that's by making it a little bit more fair and equitable for folks. You know, we're looking at, there's three main components to your rate. You know, you have the commodity, the water, and that's, like I said, we're going to increase the tiers. It's not just one or two tiers. You don't just fall into one category or the other. It gives us tremendous latitude to say, okay, well, hey, I'm going on vacation, so I'm not going to use my water for the next month, right? And so you have different tiers that you can fall into. The second part is the energy component, to be able to pump into different pressure zones, which we are increasing just due to costs. And then, you know, so we definitely want to take those into consideration when proposing these rates. And then the last component is what is formerly known as the RTS, readiness to serve charge, but we're actually calling it now a meter connection charge. And that's simply a fixed cost for us to maintain your meter, you know, to be able to maintain the meter structure and make sure it's operable and working. And that varies by the size of your meter. So if you have a 1-inch meter, you're not going to be paying as much as somebody who has an 8-inch meter, because it's just a different size, different components and things like that. So, but all of that will be discussed in detail when we talk about the rate structure.
Question. You were talking about the idea of possibly issuing a bond. And
Yes.
what if the city doesn't do that? I mean,
Well-
or does the city have, I mean, the city has to do that to be able to go with the budget for the next couple of years? Because if
No,
you didn't,
no.
then,
Yeah.
then what?
Yeah, no. So that, and that's a great question. No, we don't have to issue out a bond. I mean, we evaluated several alternatives. We can pay all cash, you know, and really it's 100% cash. We talked about 50% cash, 50% bonds. We talked about 100% bond. But if we don't have a bond, let's say a $50 million bond, then another alternative would be just to pay all cash.
Without
Without
exponentially raising rates.
well, we
Right.
would have to raise rates at that point, right? Because if we don't have a bond, we would have to pay our cash and we would have to raise rates. Because we have certain projects based on the assessment that we have to do. You know, for example, we have certain pumps that are long past their life expectancy based on ASCE standards. So we simply cannot wait. We have to undertake those projects.
Right.
And so if we don't issue out a bond, we would have to increase our customers' rates by up to 15 to 20%. And so that was one of the things that we wanted to try to avoid.
And you're talking about revenue bonds.